Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of The Names by Florence Knapp. This is a book that came out May 6th, 2025. It is a contemporary fiction from Penguin Random House Viking Books. I received this book from NetGalley in exchange for a fair review. I saw this book pop up here and there on various places, and then NetGalley had some promo for it, I think. A few minutes before I got the email, I saw someone review it on Instagram, and the review swayed me to try it. So if you've seen this book on some of those great books of 2025 lists or whatnot, yes, it is worth the hype if you like contemporary fiction. It is very good. A deeply emotional story of the ripple effect of choices, for good or for ill, The Names is also a harrowing story of domestic abuse and identity. So what is it about? The extraordinary novel asks, can a name change the course of a life? In the wake of a catastrophic storm, Cora sets off with her 9-year-old daughter Maya to register her son's birth. Her husband Gordon, a local doctor respected in the community but a terrifying controlling presence at home, intends for her to name the infant after him. But when the registrar asks what she'd like to call the child, Cora hesitates. Spanning 35 years, what follows are the 3 alternate and alternating versions of Cora's and her young son's lives, shaped by her choice of name. In richly layered prose, The Names explores the painful ripple effects of domestic abuse, the messy ties of family, and the possibilities of autonomy and healing. So to start, trigger warnings, there are some scenes of domestic violence in this book. It's not drawn out or particularly graphic, but it is disturbing. One thing this book does exceptionally well is showing how abuse and manipulation begin, why domestic violence survivors go back to their abusers so many times, and how domestic violence affects not just those directly impacted, but everybody who's touched by it. I know someone who went through a very bad domestic violence situation, and the way she explained how it started, in retrospect, and how it escalated and how he cut her off from her family and friends and slowly began to control her matched this book exactly. I think that the author did a very, very good job in researching kind of the nuances and the ways that domestic abuse functions, as opposed to just, this man hits his wife. It's a lot more complex than that. And I think that this book is actually really important because it does show, why questions about domestic violence, like why didn't she just leave, are asinine and, quite frankly, insulting. And I just think that the book did such a great job with this. So moving on from that, if you've seen the 90s movie Closing Doors, this is probably the closest comparison, though I know as soon as I finish filming this, I'll think of a book comparison, as it's not parallel universes, but just showing how one decision can cause major changes in people's lives. I will admit, I've wanted to write a book about this myself for a long time, but I hadn't been able to think of a compelling storyline. And with this book, its strength is that there's not really a plot. We basically follow one woman as she decides what to name her son and the impact the 3 different names has on her abusive husband's reaction, the son's life, and her daughter's life. There are also minor characters who show up in 2 or 3 or all the timelines, albeit in different situations. And the story moves from the naming of the kid in 1987 and jumps forward every 7 years or so until the child characters are around middle age. So in this way, we get to see how the decisions carried forward into the characters' adult lives as well. For me, who was born in 1985, cue my favorite GIF, I could have used a bit more contextual details regarding the time periods. To be honest, aside from a few historical events later in the book, I had trouble figuring out what years approximately things were taking place because there was no kind of markers in that way. While stuff like the rise of the internet, for example, might have been hard to fit into the story, details about that sort of stuff could have been slid in a bit more just for a bit more context. The structure of the book is really interesting because we get the 3 I'm going to call them timelines, even though that's not really what they are. We get the 3 timelines every 6 or 7 years or so, kind of one after the other in order, and then it jumps forward. So we're not moving back and forward in time. It's moving forward. It's just we get the 3 perspectives as we go. So it's kind of repeating itself, but things are so different for them that it doesn't feel repetitive. And it's told in third person, multiple point of view, my favorite. And there are different iterations of the people too, which is interesting. So we have Cora, the mother, who stays pretty much the same in all 3, but the boy and his sister are very different based on the role the father ends up having in their lives and in the 3 different storylines. In this way, the characters are very complex and interesting, as well as easy to understand the motivations of. I will say, though, that sometimes I had trouble telling the characters apart when they moved from one storyline to the other. I sometimes had to double check which version I was following, as sometimes I couldn't remember which Korra was in which storyline, for example, but it wasn't egregious. It was kind of like the book does expect you to pay attention to these switches, though we are provided headings. In that way, it might be a bit confusing for people, but I didn't find it confusing. it's my own brain being like, wait, who are we? Is this Julian or Gordon? What's also really clever about the novel is how the meaning or history of the three names chosen matches the personality of the male main character. It always blows my mind when people choose kind of willy-nilly what to call their kids, almost like it's an afterthought, or, to be honest, name their kids made-up popular movie character names, like Anakin. Because presumably, unless the kids hate it, it will be with them for their whole lives. Imagine being named after a child murderer who was also part of an evil empire. That's a choice on the parents' part to call your kid Anakin, and I don't think it's a choice that is made with a lot of thought behind it. No offense. Okay, sorry, I do mean offense. If you named your kid Anakin, what are you doing? For my kids, I chose even their middle names very, very carefully. I mean, my husband obviously helped. Trying to find names that were not weird, but also a little different and meaningful. I'll tell you, my eldest is Marceline, which means daughter of Mars, because I love space. And she ended up with strawberry blonde hair, which was not that weird of a coincidence, really, as my mom has that hair. But she's also tough and a leader and very athletic, so it fits her name. She fits her name. And then we have Marina, which means of the sea, because I love the ocean, who's my wild child, who unsurprisingly loves swimming. She does her own thing. She has a temper as undulating as the waves. Obviously, there's nothing about the names themselves that actually caused this, but it was important to me to give their names proper thought, even their middle names, which I'm not going to tell you what those are. I'll leave them a little bit of privacy. I try not to kind of talk too much about them on my channel. Because I think names and why people choose them is super interesting, I thought that aspect of the story was really, really cool. The writing is also excellent, very easy to follow, and flows at a great pace with natural dialogue and lots of introspection. For a debut, which often has some rough spots generally, this book was very impressive, a writer to watch for sure. Overall, despite how it can be a bit depressing and harrowing at times, honestly, the abuse isn't described that much. It just kind of runs through the background of the story. It's an excellent novel. I highly recommend it. It's worth the hype. Totally check it out. So yeah, thank you to NetGalley for the e-arc. I really appreciate it.